How many BYU players will get drafted in 2025? We're going to be looking at BYU's top prospects in the 2025 NFL draft and try to identify where they might go and some of the best team fits that they might have at the next level. First, though, we want to take a look at the relative value of each position in the NFL draft. So, looking at last year's draft, we can see some clear patterns emerging in the number of total players taken by position. Cornerbacks and wide receivers, we had 36 and 35. So you're going to see a lot of corners and receivers taken in every single draft. Offensive tackle as well. O line in general, but offensive tackle is really a position that no team ever has enough of. They need extra depth, and so you'll see a lot of tackles get taken this year again. And then defensive line in general, and 24 D tackles and 21 DNs or edge rushers in last year's draft. I expect that to be a trend again. So really kind of identified 4 or 5 premium positions that every team is likely to take a look at, regardless of what else they have at that position. So that's cornerback, wide receiver, offensive tackle, and defensive line. Also, just looking more generally at last year's draft, you had 132 offensive players taken and 121 defensive players taken. I expect a few more defensive players to be taken this year. Last year's class was considered a little bit weaker on the defensive side of the ball and much stronger in the offensive skill positions, especially at quarterback. Um, this year is kind of the opposite. You have a lot of defensive prospects with first and second round grades on them, not as many good quarterbacks, and um, not as many elite offensive skill position players. So I expect to see a little bit of a reversal this year. So we just want to keep all this in mind as we talk about each BYU player because what position they play matters almost as much as anything else in terms of the impact on their chances of getting drafted. So moving on to one of those premium positions, we are first going to talk about Caleb Etienne, offensive tackle, 6'8", 320. So his strengths are he has NFL size and he was first team All Big 12 in 2024. He had a very good season and pass blocking and run blocking. The main weakness I see right now is just the 2023 season. They put a lot of bad tape out there. And that's going to raise some questions as he goes through pre-draft interviews with teams. So he's going to have to really um, show that who he is that first team All Big 12 tackle in 2024 and not who he was during the 2023 season. I think Caleb personally is a lock to get drafted. I think he could go as high as late 4th round pick in the range of pick 130 to 135. Worst case, I see him sneaking in at the end of the 7th round, pick 240 to 250, simply because lots of teams need tackles, either starting or for depth purposes. And I think that Caleb, with his size and with how good of a year he had in 2024, could appeal to a lot of different teams. Some specific teams I've identified are the San Francisco 49ers. Trent Williams is getting up there in age, and he's done a lot of good things for them for a while, but he's not going to be able to play forever. And I don't know that they will invest a day 1 or even a day 2 pick on a tackle. But Caleb Etienne, they could look at him and see a potential developmental prospect that could sit for a year, maybe back up both tackle spots, and then potentially compete for that starting job after Williams retires. Another team would be the Cleveland Browns. They give up a lot of sacks. Um, they have a lot of needs. They may not go tackle early in the draft, so I could see them coming back to it on day 3. Some other teams, the Chicago Bears, Las Vegas Raiders, and Washington Commanders. These are teams that gave up a lot of sacks and just don't have a lot of tackles under contract next year, so they could definitely use some depth. And I think with Caleb's size and how strong his 2024 season is, I wouldn't be surprised to see some of these teams take a flyer on him. Next player that I think is a lock to get drafted is Jacob Robinson. His strengths are he's versatile. He can play outside corner. He did that very well early in his career at BYU. This last year, he played a lot more of that slot corner nickel defender, where you saw him blitz off the edge. You saw him um, match up against a little bit different kind of receiver, and he did both jobs very well. That versatility is going to help him look better to NFL defensive coordinators. He's also a ball hawk. He put up a lot of interceptions throughout his BYU career, and that big playability is going to appeal to NFL GMs as well. He also had success against NFL wide receivers such as Tito McMillan and Travis Hunter, both guys that will go in round one in this year's draft. So I think that's going to help his case as well. The only weakness I can see is his size. He's listed at 5'11, 170 per BYU's roster. I don't think he's really 5'11 and, definitely a little on the lighter end to be an NFL corner. Um, but, despite the size, I think that his big playability and how much good tape he's put out for the last couple of years, I think that makes him a day three pick. Could see him going in the early fifth round, around pick 140 to 150, or worst case, sneaking into that seventh round. Couple intriguing team fits for him would be the Baltimore Ravens. For as good as the Ravens are, they had an atrocious pass defense last year. They also could potentially lose Marlon Humphrey in free agency, their first team All Pro corner. So that really leaves them with a hole at the inside and outside corner positions. Also, just looking at their salary cap situation, they're going to have to pay some of their offensive pieces in the future. So they need cheap corners that can play. And I think Jacob Robinson fits that bill. Another intriguing fit would be the Minnesota Vikings. They're losing a couple corners to free agency. I also think he would be a great fit in that Brian Flores defense, especially with his ability to come off the edge, to play man, to play inside and outside. I think that he's the kind of corner that would be a perfect fit for that scheme. Also, just the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, another bad pass defense, despite being a playoff team. Just a team that needs some corner depth, and I think that Jacob could compete for some reps at the nickel or the outside slot, which Tampa needs. Some other possibilities: the Lions, they had all those corner injuries in the playoffs. They could maybe bolster their depth. The Steelers may lose Dante Jackson in free agency, and then the Jets um, need some other pieces in that secondary as well. Moving on to players that I think have a good chance to be drafted but aren't a lock. So this would be Tyler Batty, defensive end, played a lot of games for BYU, did a lot of good things. So I think his strengths are he has a lot of experience. He has NFL ready size already. I also think he's an elite run defender. A lot of times people look at the DN position and expect a guy that gets a lot of sacks. And while Batty can certainly rush the passer, I think where he really shines is setting that edge, taking on double teams, and being a good early down run defender. I think some of those weaknesses are he's a little bit older, so may be an issue for some NFL teams. He also has not produced as many sacks as some of the other DN prospects. So teams that are more in need of a pass rusher at this spot may not be as interested. That being said, I think his experience, his size, and his prowess against the run could make him a late fifth round pick. Worst case, I see him being a priority and very high priority undrafted free agent. A couple of potential team fits: Dallas Cowboys and New Orleans Saints. These are both bad run defenses that have some older defensive ends and some defensive ends that they're going to lose to free agency with Demarcus Lawrence, Chase Young, and then Cam Jordan getting up there in age for the Saints as well. Some other possibilities: the New England Patriots. They could really use some pieces to bolster their defense, and then the Cincinnati Bengals. Of course, they're probably a little bit better defense away from having a chance to make a deep playoff run this year. So I think that he could really come and help them shore up their run defense on early downs. Maybe he's not on the field on third down to rush the passer, but I still think he could add some value there. Next up, another team captain, Connor Pay, a 4-year starter at center. Definitely some good leadership, and I think he could play center or guard at the next level. He played a little bit of guard at BYU as well. Weakness, really just age. He also did have the injury this year, but it doesn't seem to be anything that should hamper him going into the NFL Combine and other pre-draft workouts. I could see him being an early sixth round pick. Probably not going to be drafted to be a starter at center right away, but could be a depth piece along the interior offensive line and then develop into a starter at center or guard down the road. Worst case, priority undrafted free agent. I do think he'll get a lot of options in that free agent market should he fall out of the seventh round. Some team fits. New England Patriots and Cincinnati Bengals. These are teams that gave up a lot of sacks and have older centers with not a super long time left on their contract. Um, and so I think that's a perfect situation for Connor Pay to go into and just, continue to develop for a year and then have a chance to compete for that starting center spot down the road. Other possibilities: Cleveland Browns, Dallas Cowboys, and Jacksonville Jaguars all could use some extra depth along the offensive line and potential starter down the road. And finally, we're getting into some guys now that probably won't get drafted, but do have a chance, just given the positions they play and how successful they were this year. So, Mark Collins, another corner, a transfer from Weber State, brings a lot of experience and also, like Jacob, had some success versus NFL receivers. I think some of his weaknesses, he did have an ACL tear prior to this year, so that injury history could be a concern. He also only played 1 year at the FBS level, although he was quite successful, so maybe that's not such a big deal. So yeah, I think best case he could sneak into the end of the seventh round for some teams that need a corner, and then worst case, I do think he'll get some free agent opportunities as well. So similar to like we talked about for Jacob Robinson, the Baltimore Ravens, with their cap trouble, they could really use a cheap corner that can compete for some reps. The Rams, I think he could be a good depth and developmental piece. They don't have a lot of depth at the corner position under contract right now. And some other possibilities would be the Saints, the Niners, and the Texans, more for depth purposes and, maybe a chance to compete for time down the road. And then Braden Keim, um, the other offensive tackle, he's got NFL size as well at 6'9", 315. He was very good when healthy in 2024. Had he not gotten hurt, he may have had a chance to finish first or second team All Big 12. The weakness would just be the injuries coming off of, and then not as experienced as some of these other offensive linemen we've talked about today. But again, he plays offensive tackle, an extreme premium position, so there's always a chance that he could get drafted. Worst case, I think he gets a free agent deal. Um, Similar to like we've talked about with other offensive linemen, I think the Commanders could take a look at him. They need some tackle depth, and they gave up too many sacks. The Raiders um, don't have any tackles under contract. They need to use their early picks at some other positions. So I could see him being a developmental piece for them. And then some other pieces, the Giants, the Browns, and the Bears definitely could use some reinforcements along the offensive line. And then finally, here's just a couple guys that probably won't get drafted, but could potentially get a training camp invite. So we'll want to monitor that after the draft concludes. So I think Keanu Hill, he could play wide receiver or tight end. He's very accomplished and has good size. So I could see him being intriguing for some teams that either need tight end or wide receiver depth. Um, and then Matava Taase, he did very good things as a run blocker. He also showed some ability in the red zone as a receiver. So he could be a fit for a team that likes to run multiple tight ends, maybe as that tight end 3, tight end 4, or an H back, and just really, come in motion, use his run blocking abilities, and help teams pick up some tough yards. And then Hinkley Ropati, don't know fully whether he'll stay or go, but he's experienced, and I think that he can help in the pass blocking and receiving game. That could be enough for him to get a camp invite. So that's what we've got for this week's video. Got two guys in Caleb Etienne and Jacob Robinson that I think will for sure get drafted. Tyler Batty and Connor Pay, I think, have a decent chance. And then guys like Mark Collins and Braden Keim may get it drafted or have some good opportunities in the free agent market. And then, yeah, Keanu Hill, Matabatase, Hinkley Ropati, these are guys that could potentially see some action in the free agent market. And as a bonus before we go, we want to take a little look ahead and look at some players who could get drafted next year. Linebackers Jack Kelly and Isaiah Glasker, they're both versatile. They can rush the passer, tackle, and cover. Jack Kelly, you might see him slide up and play more of an edge rusher role in 2025, just given how much BYU lost along the defensive line. And, he led the team in sacks this year, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him more in a full-time edge rusher role next year. And then Lasker, tackle for lost king. He hits super hard and can do it all. he is going to continue to rise up NFL draft boards. And then receivers, Chase Roberts and Darius Lassiter. These are experienced guys, maybe more possession guys, but savvy route runners that can move the chains. And for Lassiter, he makes those contested catches. Um, Another guy would be Will Ferrin. He was very effective, very accurate this year. Hit game winners, hit some long kicks. Uh, Earned a first team All Big 12 nomination, and he's just accurate with a big leg, and that's the description of an NFL kicker. So I think if he has another first team All Big 12 type season next year, he could see himself getting drafted or picking up a free agent opportunity. And then some others that could potentially get there if they have a really strong senior year would be quarterback Jake Retzloff. We'll do a longer video on him in coming weeks. Waylon Lapuaho, Keelan Marion, either as a receiver or a kick returner, Tanner Wall, and then tackles Isaiah Jota and Andrew Gentry. But let me know what you think. Did I miss anyone that you think has a chance to get drafted this year? And how many players do you think BYU will get drafted this year? And let me know in the comments. And until next time, go Cougs.